sometimes what I try to do in the sermons is to figure out what's going on in the whole gospel lesson and to try and work through that whole gospel lesson. And sometimes we'll just take one little tiny part of that gospel and drill in on that and focus on that and try and see what's all going on in that one little bitty verse or that part. And that's what I'm going to try and do this morning in a few minutes, but I want to do something else to get to that first, but hang on to that for just a moment. Because I want to start with just a personal note from our family this week. Earlier this week, my dad's last remaining of the three brothers-in-law passed away. My Uncle Bob died at just over age 90. He died earlier this week out in Illinois. He'd lived there most of his life, I guess. That's where we remember him. My dad had 8 brothers and 3 sisters, and of that whole gang, my dad and his brother Mart, and I think one of my aunts-in-law are the only ones still around. And Uncle Bob was, as I said, the last of the 3 brothers-in-law, so it's kind of sad that he is gone now. There were 12 of them in that generation, plus their various spouses. In my generation, there's 27 of us, and of that whole bunch, Uncle Bob was the cool uncle. Whenever we get together, and we always had a family gathering in September and a couple other times in the year, whenever we could get together. And whenever they would come, which was whenever they could, from Illinois to Ohio, we always enjoyed Uncle Bob being there because he was the first youth leader that I ever knew who wasn't actually a youth leader. The family would get together, and you know how it is, the adults would all sit around tables and talk, or in chairs and talk, and the kids would all be doing it. But Uncle Bob would not be with the adults, he would be with the kids. And he would organize the kickball game or the wiffle ball game or whatever it was, that he would organize, and the rules were the standard rules, but he would always say under the honor system. And the honor system with Uncle Bob were basically boiled down to 2 things, with him as the permanent umpire and pitcher. One was the little guys catch all the breaks, and the other one was the big guys don't get to complain. And you know, it worked for years. And whether we were little guys or big guys, we understood those rules, and it worked for a long time. And when kickballs and wiffle balls weren't available, we did honor system croquet, and it made just as much sense. And as we thought about him this week, we got together, some of us yesterday for St. Patrick's Day, and thought about Uncle Bob, and it was like, yeah, you know, whether it's honor system wiffle ball or croquet or softball or kickball, or, you know, honor system seems to be a good idea in a lot of other aspects of society, culture, government, politics, and everything else that you don't often see in other places too. Wouldn't it be a good idea if we ran the government under the honor system, where the little guys catch the breaks and the big guys don't get to complain? Yeah, well, we'll see how that works. But it got me to thinking about not only Uncle Bob and how we miss him, and how even in the midst of our missing him and our sort of tears, we never can think of Uncle Bob in crying so much. We think of him with laughter because he was such an outgoing, goofy, cool uncle kind of guy. And you know how that is sometimes with people. Almost all of us have lost at least one person, somebody else along the line, or know people that have gone on to heaven to be with the Lord. And some of them, you know, you just cry over, and then there's others you cry for a little bit and go, yeah, but remember when they did that? And then you start laughing. You know, remember how they used to do the other thing? And then you smile. You know, and it seems like the memories of that person outweigh the tears. You know, the laughing and the joyful memories just outweigh the tears and the sorrow. And the happiness just of the memories of them just outweigh those things. Because that's what life is, isn't it? I mean, life is a mixture of sorrow and tears, of gladness and pain, of suffering and joy, of all kinds of stuff. That's what life is. And And when someone dies, we're sorry for a while, but then there are other things that we think about too. When Jesus was talking to the disciples, John and James came to him and said, "What do you think of this idea, Jesus? How about if one of us sits on your right hand and the other on your left hand in glory?" And Jesus said, "Yeah, well, can you guys drink the cup I'm going to drink?" And they said, "Oh yeah, sure, we can do that." They're kind of flip about it, not really understanding what it is he was talking about. And I'm still not sure after all these years that I completely understand what he was talking about. Some people seem to think that what Jesus was talking about was, can you guys go to the cross, give up your life on the cross, suffer such immense pains and torture that Jesus was going to suffer on the cross, bleed to death and so forth, and die for the salvation of the world? Can you actually do that? And the answer, of course, is no. But they said, well, yeah, we can do that. And then Jesus says, well, you are going to suffer. You are going to drink the cup that I... So maybe that's not exactly what he was talking about. So it's kind of still a confusing and strange passage to deal with. But about 20 or so years ago, the great spiritual writer of the 20th century, Henry Nouwen, wrote this little book called Can You Drink the Cup? And it's just a meditation on just that phrase. It's not an attempt to explain this is exactly what Jesus meant. It's just an attempt to think about it and say, let's think about this phrase of Jesus saying to you and me and James and John and to all his believers, all his followers, can you drink the cup? And he talks about the cup of life, the cup of Jesus' suffering and death, the cup of Jesus' blood in communion, and the cup that we share at communion. So I've put several of them out here. Let me just take one, for instance. When St. Paul talks about Holy Communion, he says the bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? And the cup that we drink, the wine, in other words, in the cup, is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? As we eat and drink the body and blood of Christ together, we participate in the body and blood of Christ. In the communion that we have, it's a participation not only in the body and blood of Christ per se, but it's in what Jesus did on the cross. We participate in his suffering and death. Not that we get nails in the hands, and not that we get thorns in the head, but we get what he died for. We receive the forgiveness of sins that he died for. We receive the promise of eternal life. We receive redemption and grace and freedom from Satan and the breaking of the gates of hell. We receive all those things from Jesus in the simple act of drinking from the cup, the communion of the Lord's Supper. We receive that. But when Henry Nouwen writes these little devotions, he likes to break things down into actions and so forth. And so let's think about the actions involved in the Lord's Supper, and especially with the cup, and some of them. Like, for instance, if I use a cup like this, which we do sometimes, whether it's this one or the silver one up there, here's what happens. First of all, you come up to communion. That's an invitation. That's an invitation by Jesus to come and eat and drink his body and blood. We don't send the communion police out to drag you in handcuffs. Okay? We don't do that. It's just, you know that it's going to happen. It's here. If you choose to come, we're happy to have you. If you choose not to come, we'll be here next time. Okay? It's that easy. Jesus doesn't force anyone. It's just an invitation to come and receive the body and blood, the forgiveness, the grace, the mercy, and the promise of everlasting life. It's an invitation. There's no forcing involved. I don't go out into the congregation and grab anybody by the neck and say, open up now, you're going to get this, like you do with babies sometimes when you have to give them medicine. That's not the way it works. You come willingly, or you don't come, and if you don't come, it's okay. It's an invitation. And so you come, and if I use this cup, I offer it, but I hold it, and you hold it at the same time. Let's think about that for a minute. There is a sense in which it's probably a good thing that you and Jesus share your life together, and that you and Jesus both have a handle on what's going on in your life. I think it's a good thing because, to tell you the truth, this cup is kind of heavy by itself, and especially if you put wine in it. You've probably figured out by now there's nothing in it, okay? Because it's pretty heavy by yourself. You put some wine in it, it gets kind of heavy. If I hand it to you, it gets kind of surprisingly heavy. I don't know what life would be like if Jesus just kind of handed you your life and said, okay, look, here it is, it's yours, goodbye, I'll see you when you die. I'll be back in about 80 years to take you to heaven. Now you're on your own. You get the whole thing all by yourself. You got to carry it without any help. I don't know what life would be like. I'd hate to think what life would be like without Jesus there to say, let's both carry it together. Let me share it with you. I mean, Jesus came down from heaven, gave up everything in heaven to take on everything it meant to be a human being, to take on all our weaknesses, our sufferings, our joys, our sorrows, our pains, our griefs, but also our delights and everything else. He shares everything with us. Would it be so bad an idea to say, Jesus holds the cup with us and shares with us so that we don't have to go through it all by ourselves all the time? Maybe it's a good thing. Yeah, we take it, you kind of guide it, I hold it, but you guide it so that you can take just enough for any one given day. Just enough so that you don't overdo it, because, you still have to drive home after communion, and you don't want to take too much of a big gulp at one time. And that's all right. But, I wouldn't want anybody to get the idea that to say, all right, Jesus, it's mine. I'm going to control what's going on in my life, and you're not. You're just going to, Then we get into some other issues there that sometimes get into lots of ethical conversations, especially when we get around, the conversations about what happens at the end of the Christian life. What do we do with Christians who are in pain and suffering and dying, and how do we navigate those dark and murky, stormy waters? Say, what do we do about those things? And how do we talk to people about the way we approach death if Jesus is also holding the cup with us? I don't know how to do that sometimes with folks. Are there parts of life that we'd rather not go through? Of course. Were there parts of Jesus' life that he would have said, Father, you know what? You take the cup. I don't want it at this point. Well, of course he did. He did that in the Garden of Gethsemane. Father, here's part of the cup that I really don't want. Nevertheless, if it's your will, let it be done, not my will. That's what Jesus did. And maybe knowing that he shares holding the cup with us gives us the strength to hold the cup with him too, and to sit from that cup with him. Still, this is not the cup that we use all the time. We use it sometimes. This is the cup we use other times as well, these ones like this. And there's a little bit of a different meaning to this one, perhaps. That one is a good one to think about what St. Paul said when he said, the body that we eat, or the bread that we eat, we're all one body, and the cup that we drink, because we drink of the one cup, we're all one in Jesus Christ. It's one cup. You kind of lose that a little bit with these cups, the idea of the one community, but this gives us a little different picture. These are a little different. If I hand you this cup, again, there's an invitation. I'm going to hand you one like this, and you have to decide whether you're going to take it. Are you going to accept the invitation to take everything that is offered by Jesus? Are you going to take everything that is offered by him? You don't have to necessarily think about whether he's sharing that, but you take everything that life has to offer by Jesus. All the things that we talk about that God gives you on a daily basis. will you accept that from Him and receive that from Him? Now, that's definitely not all the things that everybody in life experiences. Okay, you know, when we're done, like I've noticed this with these little cups. When you take this and drink this, you drink it down. Okay, everybody does. Okay, and that means you don't just sip at it halfway and say, okay, I'm only taking half of it. You know, like Jesus today, I'm only going to take the good parts. I don't want any of the tears, so I'm not going to take the grief. I don't want that. You drink the whole thing. Now there's still a few drops left in it, and so maybe that means that there are some parts of life that no matter who you are, you're not going to experience every part of life. And it's not by choice, it's just the way it is. Like, not everybody gets to experience the joy and pleasure of childbearing. Men, okay? I mean, it's just the way it is. And not every one of us is going to get to experience what it means to have cancer, or a heart attack, or not every one of us is going to get to experience the newest ride at Cedar Point. Okay? For many of us, that's a matter of choice anymore. All right? And that's okay. But for the most part, when I give you this cup, you just drink it. And for the most part, whatever the day brings, whatever God gives us at the beginning of each day, you just take each day as it comes. Whatever Jesus gives us in that day, we drink it right down, but not right away. Because here's what I've noticed happening at this rate. I take the cup out of the tray, and I hand it to you, and you pause for just a moment. There's a pause. And in that pause, Henry Nouwen says, there's almost a moment when you know you want to do this. You know, like we wanted to do for Uncle Bob. You know, raise the glass. Let's have a toast to Uncle Bob. Let's have a toast to the ones who we've lost. Let's have a toast to bride and groom. Let's have a toast to whoever. I actually did that one time. I didn't do it, but I was giving communion to a 100-year-old Slovak lady, and I was saying, you know, this is the blood of Christ given for you. I was saying it in Slovak to her, and she responded by saying, na zdravia, before she drank it. You know, so whether it's na zdravia or prost or to your health or whatever it is, or, you know, in Jewish, l'chaim, right, like they do in Fiddler on the Roof. To life, l'chaim, 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 to life. You know, and if our good fortune never comes, here's to whatever comes. Drink l'chaim to life. That's the way the Jews did in, you know, the Fiddler on the Roof. So that's what you do. Here's to whatever comes. And there's always that, maybe we want to do this. We're waiting for somebody to bang the fork against the glass before we drink. Maybe not at communion, but yeah, there's still that inkling that maybe that's what you should do. To whatever comes. But you don't exactly do that. But here's what some do sometimes. I give the cup and you drink. And you drink it down. And you drink it all, or almost all. But some don't right away. Some wait. Sometimes it's a couple. Sometimes it's a whole family. And they wait until everybody in their little group has it, and then they drink together. A husband and wife. Maybe a whole family. It's like a family within the family. A community within the community. It's a way to talk about, it's a way to show that oneness even when you have the individual cups. We're one together in Jesus Christ, even though we all have our own little individual cups. Let's wait until we all get our cups, and then we all drink together, because we're all one in our little family, as a married couple, in our little group. We are one in Jesus Christ, who has made us one. You might not always see that up there, but I always see it from this angle, from here. And it's neat to see that, too. I'm not saying you have to do it, I'm just saying it's neat to see that happens. However it happens, whether it's this cup or that cup, Jesus gives that to us in the Lord's Supper. I'm not saying that this is exactly what he meant when he said to James and John, "Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink?" Oh yeah, we can do that. I know. He may have had other things in mind. I'm pretty sure he meant more of his suffering and death. And yet, he would still take them to that upper room. He would still take them there on that Thursday evening. He would share that Passover meal with them. He would give them that Lord's Supper, transforming that Passover meal into this meal that we have, this communion. And maybe he did, in a sense, mean that. Maybe he did, in a sense, mean everything that you have in life, he also experiences. He became a human being to share our life with us. And he shares his suffering, his death, his resurrection, his blessing, his grace, his forgiveness with us because he shared our life too. And in that cup that we receive that's here, we receive all those things and that forgiveness and that promise that he also will share that with us forever in heaven. In Jesus' name.